I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're turning off our house lights and absolutely legging it to the bedroom so we don't get eaten by the monsters lurking just beyond our peripheral vision, as I tell you my scariest enemy from each Soulsborne game. From Software have always been masters of atmosphere, and with that comes the ability to create some truly horrifying, terrifying, and downright creepy enemies to inhabit their worlds. Of course, what some may consider scary, others may consider cute, so I'm really drawing on my own experiences to fill up this list, and I highly doubt our lists will match. So without further ado, let's kick off my two-part Halloween 2023 special, the scariest enemy from each Soulsborne game, ranked. And let me know the scariest enemies you've faced in the comments below. For our Demon Souls entry, there's only one enemy in the game that, for me, earns a spot on this list. And you all should know which one it is, for once you hear the ringing of their bells, it's already too late for you. The Mind Flayers, found throughout the Tower of Latria Archstone, are the jailers of the Prison of Hope, roaming around the halls like shambling corpses, ensuring no sneaky prisoners escape from their cells. Given they were brought back to Latria following the old monk's return from his banishment, I can only assume he was busy playing the Baldur's Gate 3 Mind Flayer romance path in his downtime. Mind Flayers have 3 distinct attacks they can use to punish escapees, and new players will definitely be caught off guard. There's a long-range Soul Ray spell, which will do decent damage if you don't block or avoid it. They can cast a Sonic Boom spell when you're close by, which can knock you back, but most importantly for this list, they can cast a Paralyzing Bolt that leaves you stuck in place, allowing the Mind Flayer to pick you up and pierce you with a tentacle stab. It's that moment when you're completely helpless, and you see this horrific creature coming towards you, that puts the fear in the hearts of gamers everywhere. Back on the PS3, when people didn't know how to play Soulsborne games to the extent they do now, these jailers caused a severe amount of stress and terror. You never wanted one to spot you because they'd come running down the hall ready to pounce on you when you're vulnerable, and their faint ringing bells have the power to call other Mind Flayers nearby to their location. Due to Latria's level design, you often have to look around corners and down tight corridors, making the chance of an ambush that much higher. They may be fairly easy to defeat with a ton of Souls experience, but I still think they're terrifying. There's nothing worse than climbing up the Man-Eater's boss fight in 3-2, only to see that red phantom above you on the stairway, standing there menacingly. Truly a horrifying sight. Moving on to the original Dark Souls, we have a couple of good options for this list. The Chained Prisoner at the end of the Ulasiel Township absolutely terrified me my first time playing, as I wasn't even sure what I was looking at. Or how about the Skeleton Dogs in the Tomb of the Giants, revealed just beyond the torchlight, ready to pounce on unsuspecting players. And of course our first run-in with Soulsborne Mimics, but more on them next week. No, for me this spot goes to the ghosts of the New Londo Ruins, an area you can stumble upon almost immediately after arriving in Lordran, and often recommended due to the easy Firekeeper soul you can grab. It's inhabited by these translucent creatures, the spirits of those who passed away in the Great Flood of the city. So aside from the obvious, being that they're fairly horrifying ghosts who have the ability to stretch their limbs and glide towards you, what puts them over the edge for the scary factor? Quite simply, it's the fact that you can't immediately kill them. A new player is going to wander into the ruins, see their first enemy, attempt to attack, and then reel in horror as their sword doesn't connect. It just phases through the ghost, leaving you wondering how you're supposed to kill them while the ghosts continue to pile up. There is nothing more terrifying than entering that damned ghost house near the end of the level, and having them pouring out of the walls and rising up from the floors, arms outstretched to cut you down as you try to climb that ladder to the roof. There are only 3 ways to damage these ghosts. You can use a cursed weapon, but the only one you'll be able to obtain initially is the cursed Greatsword of Artorias weapon through Sif's boss soul, as the other 2 cursed weapons in the game are dropped by the ghosts. You can become cursed yourself via a basilisk, which also allows you to damage ghosts, or you can use the transient curse consumable item that you can find in a pot just before the bridge to the ruins. But no new player is going to think to read about what a transient curse is, and we've seen that confusion play out time and time again. So for the sheer panic of the ghosts being non-damageable, and then once you're able to damage them, having to deal with their ability to phase through the level design at will, I think they earn a spot on our list. Honestly, none of the enemies in Dark Souls 2 stand out as particularly terrifying. Horrifying? Sure. Creepy? Yeah. But I wouldn't call any scary, so I'm bailing myself out of this predicament by leaning on my old faithful, my good old severe arachnophobia. So I'll be nominating pretty much every spider-based enemy in Brightstone Cove Seldora for this spot, because the way that the game sets up the spiders here is absolutely genius for terrifying the living shit out of me. From those first rooms where you can see the holes the spiders will come out of, especially the one with the chest in the center that I refuse to open to this day. Heading into the main cove, there are so many nooks and crannies for the spiders to emerge from, especially once you head indoors. Ambushes are extremely common, and I have to double check every single room to make sure there's no way a spider can just crawl out of the woodworks and kill me. The main temple is a bit less scary because they actually give you ample room to run through the spiders at your leisure, and I've got the path back to the boss seared into my memory so I can do the run back without thinking. Then I discovered you could just hold a torch in your offhand and most of the spiders won't attack you. It was an absolute blessing that made my recorded playthrough of this zone so much easier, and kept me from wanting to burn my house down from the fear that spiders are invading my home. And then I saw the spider drones, undead who are being controlled from within by said spiders like parasites, and they aren't afraid of my firelight. So immediately I went and cried, because that's a fate worse than death and I don't even want to imagine it, and I am feeling sick to my stomach already, but maybe that's just because I'm hungry. Look, I just really hate spiders. And that's not even taking into account the big change to this area on New Game Plus, that I'll talk about in next week's video. And we've reached From Software's scariest game. Bloodborne has an entire menagerie of enemies that could top this list. Brainsuckers, the Upper Cathedral Ward wolves, winter lanterns, that one giant fucking spider in the Nightmare of Mensis that is the sole reason arachnophobes struggle playing this game. But for this ranking, I actually wanted to go a bit left field and talk about an enemy from the Chalice dungeons. Now, I haven't had a massive amount of experience with this aspect of Bloodborne, having only done them once to kill Queen Yharnam for the achievement, and that was about it. However, I recall a few moments of genuine terror that I want to recount. Firstly, we have the Nightmare Apostle Red Spiders. These would be my number one pick for the scariest Bloodborne enemy due to their uncanny ability to lock onto you from anywhere in the Chalice dungeon, and their ability to respawn unless you kill the witch that's spawning them, meaning I can just open a door and get fucking jump scared by my worst fear. But given my Dark Souls 2 entry, I wanted to branch out a bit, so let's talk about the horrors of the Labyrinth Sage. These creepy enemies can be found throughout the Chalice dungeons and have two very distinct features. The way they morph through the environment, like a Japanese ghost, almost like they're missing frames of movement, it's so unnatural and creepy and ugh. But more importantly, their haunting, deafening scream that causes Bloodborne players everywhere to seize up with genuine fear. For the Labyrinth Sages only let out their scream when they've spotted a new victim. Keyword being when they have spotted you, not you spotting them. It's very likely that you'll hear their scream before you even knew one was in the area. And it's that level of fear, combined with their bounding movement speed, that has Bloodborne players fearing for their lives in the Chalice dungeons. Some of Bloodborne's scariest moments happen in those places, and it's an aspect of the game most players won't actively seek out since it's not a part of the main story. which just means that some players will be blessed that the Winter Lanterns are the most terrifying creatures they have to deal with. But we know better. We know better. If I can just take a brief moment of your time, my new channel goal is to reach 20,000 subscribers by summer of 2024. And you guys can help. Just look at how many of you aren't subscribed so far. Be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my latest videos. Back to the video. Moving on to Dark Souls 3, and I know exactly what enemy I would like to talk about for this spot. The monstrosity of sin found tucked away in a church in the profaned capital is easily one of FromSoft's most horrific enemy designs I've ever seen. A frothing mouth shaped like a hand, eyes on its chest, and coarse elephant-like flesh that is difficult to cut into. What the fuck were they on when they designed these creatures? Sure, there are other terrifying enemies in Dark Souls 3, those creatures in Irithyll Dungeon with the baby faces come to mind, as do the hordes of dreglings in the Dreg Heap that crawl up from the ground and keep respawning in that one set of houses. But no enemy has kept my rapt attention more than the monstrosity of sin, because seriously, what the fuck are they? How was I supposed to be prepared when opening the door to this church 6 or 7 years ago to see these things stumbling towards me? They're tanky, disgusting, and nobody online seems to have any idea on what these things are. What's their lore? I have no idea. Why are they so tucked away, hidden from the rest of the game? Was this just a rejected Bloodborne monster that got placed here because they needed to fill space? Or was this some sick joke by the developers to just make the players never want to come back here again? They're never referenced after this point, and I've never seen any real attempt to figure out what they are or who they're supposed to be. The closest we've come is that they likely have something to do with the profaned flame, but the lore of that fire is overtaken by both Pontiff Sullivan and Yorm, so they're overshadowed there too. I just think it's fascinating we have one of the most horrific and inspired enemy designs in the series, hidden in a little hideaway with no context whatsoever. This likely won't be everyone's pick for Dark Souls 3, and I urge you to share your choices down below, but I am so enamored by the mystery presented by these sentient thumbs, I have no choice but to include them. For Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, I have two very easy picks for this list. My honourable mention goes to the monks of Senpo Temple, who are corrupted and puppeted by the centipedes inside them. There is nothing more terrifying to me than an enemy that is completely controlled by an outside force, as we saw with the spider drones in Dark Souls 2. Only the centipedes are more grotesque, and I find these enemies much harder to fight. I'll often skip them entirely to avoid the trouble and to avoid the nightmares. But the scariest enemy of Sekiro easily goes to the Headless. Technically a mini-boss, but who cares, it's my list. They're designed to instill terror into the hearts of the player and Sekiro himself, and I love the way they're designed. The Headless are only ever encountered in the dark places of the world, hidden caverns and tombs, misty forests, and deep underwater. Whenever you fight an otherworldly creature in Sekiro, the Apparitions theme plays with tense strings, eerie sound effects, and a low guttural chant that sets the scene spectacularly. And against the Headless, it activates your fight or flight response, only in this instance, you can't flee easily. For the Headless create a slowness effect that causes Wolf to move at an incredibly slow speed. You're paralyzed with fear, and the only way to overcome it is to equip that divine confetti and go to town. The Headless will attack with slow, ethereal sword slices, which you can deflect for decent posture damage. And then it will vanish and immediately appear behind you, attempting to activate a grab attack, and if it gets you, based on the animation, it looks like it rips out your spine, which is just lovely. You can jump forwards when they warp to avoid the grab and keep your composure, and once you figure out their pattern, the fight becomes a case of not letting your nerve get the better of you. After all, if you play sloppily, your terror meter will build up, resulting in a heart attack if it reaches its maximum. There are other apparition-based enemies in Sekiro, but none have quite the terrifying visual design as the Headless, and whether on land or underwater, they know how to put up an absolutely brutal fight and deserve this spot with applause. When it comes to Elden Ring, there are a lot of creepy and downright scary enemies to choose from, so I decided to go back to my original first playthrough of the game and think, which enemies terrified me more than any other? And I managed to narrow it down to two. The Royal Revenants, with their horrifying ability to teleport and appear just about any location they feel like, alongside their massive reach and movement which makes them incredibly hard to fight, and their design is just terrifying to begin with. It doesn't help that my first experience facing one was in the subterranean shunning grounds after falling through a pipe into a pitch black sewage room. I knew something was in there with me, I just wasn't sure what to expect, and I couldn't have predicted exactly what was coming my way. However, the final creature on today's list is the Finger Creepers, found at Caria Manor, Mount Gelmir, in Leyndell, and atop the mountaintops of the Giants. They really found a way to make spiders oh so much worse. Finger Creepers are sentient hands with way too many fingers that scrabble along the ground, laying in wait for their next victim to step into their traps. They hang from walls, know how to ambush the player, and constantly appear when you least expect nor want them to appear. In Caria Manor, you at least have the ability to survey your surroundings to avoid them, but when you reach areas like the end of Mount Gelmir and they just climb up the sides of the cliffs near the manor to scare you, there's not much I could do except run the fuck away and never look back. They activate that fight or flight response from my arachnophobia, while also being so immaculately designed that I can't help but respect it. Then I saw the colossal Finger Creepers in the mountaintops. Now, I will acknowledge that as a fight, these enemies don't put up too much of a challenge, often the only danger being that they can paralyze you like the Demon Souls Mind Flayers, resulting in some intimate squeezing from their hands. And the rest of their moveset can be blocked through, plus running a strength shield build means you can stagger them very quickly with shield breaks. But if this list was about how easy enemies were to kill, it'd be a bit boring. It's the way that even if an enemy is easy to kill, that it still makes me viscerally uncomfortable, that earns it the spot on this list. And that's my scariest enemies from each Soulsborne game. What enemies cause you to drop the controller in fear? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future content. And definitely tune in on Halloween as I reveal my top 10 scariest moments in Soulsborne. My socials are on screen now, feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Blue Sky if you have it. A massive shout out to my patrons over on Patreon, thank you for supporting me this month, you guys are amazing, and I'll see you all in the next video. Adios.